Since the Industrial Revolution of the 18th and 19th century, humans have made strides in technological advancements that allow us to harvest, create, and use an ever-widening range of chemicals and compounds. These chemicals are usually multi-purpose and harmless, or extremely toxic if handled incorrectly. As years go by, the ever-increasing chemicals we use become chemical waste. These wastes pose a major threat to the environmental and human health. The industrial and healthcare industries are dependent on a lot of these chemicals and as a result have copious amounts of chemical waste. In the following presentation, led by Kerlyn
Teshica,
Williams,
Jessica Derrell.
we seek to educate you on this surprisingly complex topic, the problem of chemical waste, industrial and hospital waste. Why do we need to properly dispose of our biomedical waste? Well, it's simple for us to be able to enjoy a high quality of living and also to preserve the environment and ecosystem for future generations. What are the types of hospital waste? The waste includes sharps waste, which are objects that can puncture the skin, such as needles and syringes, chemical waste, which can be found in medical equipment and in disinfectants for sanitization, pharmaceutical waste, which are the rejected or expired drugs and vaccines, cytotoxic waste, which are the waste which contain genetic altering chemicals, such as carcinogenic substances. Radioactive waste, they are the waste which contain chemicals that release radiation into the environment. We have 3 hospitals in Barbados. This includes the psychiatric hospital and 19 clinics in Barbados, including the private practices. As illustrated by my map, most of the hospitals and clinics are found in St. Michael and a few along the coastal areas. That means if any of these clinics or hospitals have practiced improper disposal of their waste, that means the groundwater, the surface water, and eventually the sea will be polluted, thus causing health risks towards the people who live in that area and also the animals. The amount of medical waste generated globally. There are 85% of the waste are non-hazardous waste and 15% of the waste are hazardous waste. Here are some examples of common chemicals found in hospital equipment. Mercury. Mercury is a neurotoxin and it attacks the central nervous system and causes brain damage. This can be found in medical gauges and thermometers, to name a few. PFCs. These are linked to liver and pancreatic tumors in animals, and they also disrupt the fetal development in humans. And they are used the waste are organized in such a way so that none of the waste will be contaminated, right? So we have in the green can, we have the general waste, the kitchen waste, paper, tissues, and they are either incinerated or brought to the landfill. Infected plastics, such as the gloves, plastic waste, are in the red bin, and they're They're discarded after they go through a process called autoclaving in order to disinfect them, and then they're brought into the landfill. The yellow bin contains the infected waste, and they're autoclaved and also incinerated and then buried deeply in the landfill. The glassware, except for the cytotoxic materials, are also disinfectant using autoclaving and then recycled. And the sharps, waste, needles, and cut glasses are put into a container which is secure, and it's impossible to have any cuts to prevent any transference from the container to the environment, and it's placed in a sharp pit. On your left, we have the autoclave, and on the right, the incinerator. So how do we help clean the environment? We can help by reducing our waste. Yes, the chemicals used in the hospitals are important to help others get better health. However, we can also inform the general public about the effects of these chemicals and the effects of improper distribution and improper disposal. We are speaking of informing the public.
Good day, everyone, and welcome to the industrial chemical waste section of our presentation. What does industrial mean? The term industry is a very broad term and encompasses a lot of different sectors and services and time periods. In this case, industry is going to be used to refer to manufacturing and service industries. The manufacturing and service industries can be further divided up into primary, secondary, and tertiary. Primary industry is concerned with obtaining and producing raw materials that will be used for manufacture in the secondary industries. The secondary industries are associated with processing the primary or raw materials and turning them into tangible goods or commodities and products for use by the consumer and the tertiary industry. The tertiary industry is heavily based in service and sometimes production, where they produce final products and services for the consumer. Examples of these industries are on the screen. The only issue with this is that they produce a lot of chemical wastes. Let's begin with the primary industries. The primary industries, as said before, provide raw materials. This encompasses mining for minerals and oils, horticulture, livestock rearing, agriculture, fisheries, and so much more. Here in Barbados, the main primary industries that can be producing hazardous chemicals would be mining and livestock and agriculture. Here's an image of the Black Bess quarry where they are mining limestone products. So let's begin with mineral mining. The mineral mining industry is connected with getting valuable or useful minerals such as coal, diamonds, gold, bauxite. You can find all of these from Jamaica and Guyana, uranium from Kazakhstan and Canada, which is very radioactive, iron ore from Australia and Brazil, and so much more. In Barbados, the process known as quarrying is harvesting limestone, coral, clays, shale, sand, and gravel, and carboniferous deposits. This is the main form of mining here in Barbados. The products of which are used in building materials. The issue with this mining, open cast mining, is that it leads to a lot of water pollution because the dust from the mining end up in the air as well as water bodies. And when they're in the air, they can be rained out through precipitation, and also in the water bodies, they end up in groundwater, which is water that we use to drink. This results in the phenomenon known as hard water, where the water has a lot of dissolved calcium or magnesium in it, and this makes it hard for it to dissolve other compounds such as soaps and detergents and things that we need to use in our daily lives. As well, it leaves this thing called lime scale on your sinks and dishes and so on and so forth. The oil industry is a very large industry around the world, producing billions and billions of barrels of oil every year. However, in Barbados, it's quite small. But every day, toxic spills happen on land and on sea, leaving soils polluted and unusable for years, and also poisoning the air with volatile organic compounds and PAHs. Those who live in vulnerable areas, the poorest of us, are the ones who are most affected. And those people have to use the oil in illegal and harmful ways that harm their health to make a living. Livestock and agriculture are the means by which we get our food and some of our textiles. Barbados produces a lot of organic waste, but the real issue here is the agrochemicals that cause waste pollution. The pesticides, insecticides, herbicides, fungicides, fertilizers that end up in the water bodies as they're leached from the soils after they're used on plants and used among animals pollute our waters. As well, in some countries such as in China, they burn their waste, open burning it, and that allows a lot of greenhouse gases and particulates into the environment, into the atmosphere.
Secondary industries. These industries convert raw materials provided by primary industry into commodities and products for the consumers. Three secondary industries that I will be using as examples to discuss chemical waste are leather manufacturing, construction, and printing industries. Leather manufacturing. In leather manufacturing companies, tons of hazardous waste are produced during leather manufacturing process. Here are a few chemical wastes produced: chromium, acid and alkaline salts, alkaline wastewater, ammonium sulfate, calcium hydroxide, hydrogen sulfide, suspended solids, toxic sulfides, high volume of alcohols, ketones, methyl ethyl ketone, toluene, and xylene. Paint industries. Screening, cleaning, plate, and print processes all produce high level of chemical waste varying from a long list of chemical compounds. Waste ink with chromium, barium, and lead content. Waste contaminated with cleaning solvents such as trichloroethylene, methylene chloride, chlorobenzene, xylene, acetone, methanol, methyl ethyl ketone, toluene, carbon disulfide, and benzene are just a few of chemicals used in this industry. Construction industries. Just like the other two given secondary industries, construction generates tons of chemical waste. Construction, demolition, and renovation is a huge industry, and construction work is always being done. Barbados has many hotels and homes being constructed on the island for the past decade. It's also the home to two cement plants. Chemical waste is generated from land clearing, wrecking and demolition, heavy construction, carpentry and floor work, painting. Some chemicals that make up the chemical waste in constructions are toxic wreckage and debris and lead pipe, xylene, chlorobenzene, glazes, methanol, methyl chloride, petroleum distillates, pigments, solvents, stripping compounds, and wastewater. All three examples have similar in the type of chemical waste being produced, such as xylene, chlorobenzene, toluene, the ketones, and alcohols. Here are some solutions for the treatment and disposal of chemical waste in general. Filtering water for reuse in process. Reuse suspended solids as ingredients in organic fertilizers. Treat wastewaters in wastewater treatment units regulatory by the Clean Water Act. Collect hazardous wastes and ship using is registered hazardous waste transporter to a hazardous waste, reclaim solvents in one on-site distillation unit and reuse on-site. Some potential prevention methods for chemical waste from secondary industries are using the printing industry as an example. Dedicate presses to specific colors or special inks to decrease the number of cleanings required for each press. Clean ink fountains only when changing colors or when there is a risk of ink drying. Run similar jobs simultaneously to reduce waste volume. Isolate inks contaminated with hazardous cleanup solvents from non-contaminated inks. Using organic solvent alternatives where possible. Some other possible potential prevention methods are store waste solvents separately to facilitate recycling, use efficient washing procedures to reduce wastewater generation, reduce air emissions by thermal drying in a controlled area with solvent recovery systems, and lastly, most importantly, re-engineer processes to utilize less chemicals.
The tertiary industries. This is at the end of the chain. And the tertiary industries are mainly focused on providing services for people. We'll be focusing on the cleaning wastes that are caused by this industry, as well as vehicular waste oils. The cleaning wastes are because there are hygienic standards that need to be upheld in these industries where human beings are utilizing the service over and over and carry with them disease, bacteria, and other contaminants. So detergents, bleaches, soaps, and fragrances that have very harsh chemicals are necessary to remove bacteria and other things that can be pathogenic or infectious to humans and animals. They contain harsh things like surfactants, which strip surfaces of oil and grease, and enzymes which break down organic matter, as well as other things that are very harsh. The problem is when these things are washed down from surfaces, they end up in water bodies that can then be leading into groundwater for humans to drink, or just surface water that other animals need to use. And the harsh chemicals end up in their systems, causing death, disease, infections, toxicity that will kill animals as well as humans. The microbiome will also be affected in these water bodies by the chemicals. Old machine and vehicle oil. Motor oils and lubricants are a mixture of petroleum-based hydrocarbons made from crude oil. This off the bat lets you know that they have toxic materials in them. They're slow to degrade, they're tacky, so they will stick onto surfaces very easily and be very hard to remove. They are persistent, which means they last very long in the environment, and they contain toxic chemicals and heavy metals. The only good that comes from these is that they are useful for the time that they are used inside of the vehicle. But after that, they become a very big waste problem, and they end up in groundwater.
Our society's dependence on chemicals has increased due to the important roles they play in the hospital and industrial sectors. In order to reduce the accumulation of chemical waste, we need to first inform the masses of the serious nature of the chemicals that we sometimes unknowingly interact with, and also re-engineer some processes to reduce the use of chemicals. Thank you for your undivided attention.